Welcome to episode 172 of the No Clue podcast. This is our college basketball special episode. We got two guests for you today. We got men's basketball tournament talk with Mike and our boy Tyler. And I got to talk to my dear friend Jessica, who is over at the Hoop Love podcast, WNBA podcast, about the women's college basketball tournament. So, you know us. I'm Tyler.
I'm Mike.
And stay tuned. Coming up right after this break, we'll get in. Welcome to our women's basketball segment of the No Clue podcast, episode 172. I'm your host. I'm Tyler. I'm here with one of my dear friends. Great basketball mind, great basketball player. Introduce yourself.
Absolutely. What's up, everybody? It's your girl, Jessica, a.k.a. J. Michelle, and I am the host and creator of the WNBA podcast entitled Hoop Love. It's your basketball podcast for all things WNBA. So super excited to be here today to hop on with you, Tyler, and let's talk some women's basketball.
Let's talk about it. The bracket is out. The tournaments are great tournaments. I went to the ACC tournament. It was amazing. I'm excited for this. Really excited.
Oh yeah. I think March Madness is going to be fun. It's always a good time of year for basketball, and the women's tournament I think is going to be super steamy this year. So I'm excited, looking forward to it.
For sure. So tell me what you think about the bracket. First reactions.
First reactions. Like I said, March Madness is one of my favorite times of the year, and this one definitely promises to be a good one as well. You know, looking at all four of the regions, I'm like, man, can I get tickets to all four to be to all the games in person? That would be super dope. But, first look at the bracket, my first reaction, it's going to be a good one. There's a lot of matchups that I'm definitely looking forward to. So it's going to be a good tournament.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you think is the toughest bracket? Let's start there.
Man, like I said, they're all good, but I got to say that I feel that it's the Wichita region for me, honestly. I mean, there's so many good teams, in that region, and it's really anybody's game in each round. I mean, in that one bracket, or in that one region, rather, the Wichita region, I mean, you've got Louisville, you've got Tennessee, you've got Michigan, you've got Baylor, and that's just to name a few. So I'm definitely excited to, keep an eye on that region. I think it's the toughest. I mean, I think they have the most competitive. I think that bracket is going to definitely be the most competitive. I think other regions could be a little bit of an easy road in quotes, right? It's never easy, but I think the Wichita region is definitely one of the tougher brackets or the tougher regions.
And you say that because of the teams, you think, or the players, or?
Absolutely. I think because of the teams. I mean, those teams in particular, right? They're playing their top basketball at the right time of the season. March Madness is high stakes, so I'm definitely getting my popcorn. I'm ready for it.
Okay. I was looking at, for me, I think the Spokane region is going to be serious because I see a lot of teams that are kind of low that could be a big team, a higher seeded team. And I see these coaches, great coaches in that region. Brenda Fries, Kim Mulkey at LSU now, Vic Schaefer at Texas. Those, man, I mean, you can't go wrong with either one. You can't go wrong with any of the regions. But I'm most excited to watch that one, I think. But the Wichita region, like you said, you got other teams like Oregon, who I'm going to get into later, Michigan, like you said. Ole Miss is underrated. Yeah, it's gonna be a ride. It's gonna be a ride.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can just jump in, the Ole Miss is one I want to point out. I personally called them the comeback kids. I mean, they're all, they're down, but not in their spirit, right? They're always fighting, they're always pushing back, and they're giving teams a good run for their money. So, Coach Yo's got those girls hooping. So that's going to be definitely a team to watch.
Yeah, for sure. So give me some of your most surprising seedings that you thought maybe were too high or too low. It could be based on injuries, record. The record could be, competition or whatever. Which ones?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to start here, Tyler, with the SEC team that I want to highlight. I think one of the more surprising seedings for me was definitely the Kentucky Wildcats. I mean, of course, they just won the SEC. And it's kind of a tough situation, right? Because, I watch the SEC a lot. That's one of my favorite, actually is my favorite women's college conference, the SEC. But I got to say that Kentucky, they're, a 6 seed, in that Bridgeport region, I believe it is. And it's like, it's a tricky thing, though, because they've played, their record was only 19-11 on the season. They finished number 15 in the country. However, they've really, really heated up and really hit their stride, down the stretch of the regular season going into the SEC tournament. And it's tough because I know the committee is having to kind of zoom out and look at it, okay, all things considered from their season, not just the latter part of it. So it's definitely a tough one. But I got to say, Kentucky, man, they should have, I think, at least been a 3 or 4 seed, but that's just me.
No, you're right. They dealt with a lot of injuries that made them lose a lot of games towards the middle of the season. They started off good. In the middle of the season, they lost a lot of games. I think they were missing Howard and Is it Massengill? They were missing 2 starters at one point. And
absolutely.
The committee, it is hard for them to look at that and say, well, if they were there, you get into that situation. But you're completely right. Now that they're full strength going into the tournament, they looked great in the SEC tournament. I'm with you. They're definitely low. They could surprise teams and make it really far.
Yeah, definitely absolutely. And I have to put this out there too. I think that Tennessee, right, with them being a 4 seed, they I think I would say this. I think that them being a number 4 seed is not bad placement, right, considering their overall season. But it's tricky because now they're playing without Jordan Horston, who's injured. And, she's missed at least the last, 2, 3, 4 weeks of the regular season.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. I think that they're well placed as far as their seeding, but with that key player as a huge dominating part of their offense out due to injury, it's going to be interesting ride for the Tennessee Volunteers, I think.
You're completely right. I think she was leading them in rebounds and points at the time she got injured. So they're definitely at risk of getting what would seem like an upset, but without her really isn't that big of an upset.
Absolutely. You're right. Yeah.
Most situations, she's the best player on the floor. Who else? Any more?
Man, I got to tell you this. And I'm going to say one more thing about Tennessee before I get to that next point is one thing that I think Tennessee has on their side, right? Yeah, Jordan Horston is out. She's a big part of what their offensive and defensive plans are. However, they've got players on their team that are stepping up at the right time. Ray Burrell, Tamari Key in the paint. So I think that their coach has some good weapons on the team still remaining. But how do they shift and come together at this time where you got to turn it up? Or if you lose, your season's over. So it's going to be fun to watch. Definitely.
Yeah. Having that go-to player and then transitioning into balance is tough. And we know as basketball players, it's never easy to fill that kind of hole.
Oh, yeah. And I'm going to go back to your question here. So the other seeding that kind of surprised me is Baylor. Baylor's had a good season. Yeah. But I don't know if I'm looking at this correctly, right? They're a 2 seed in the Wichita region. And I'm like, are they really a 2 seed? However, Nalissa Smith is coming to prove a point this season, right? She's saying, hey, I should be the number 1 draft pick in the WNBA. Strap up and get ready because I'm going to show you why. And so I think for that reason, should they really be a 2 seed? I don't know if I think they should be. However, again, that's another team that, all people are clicking at the right time, and they could be a dangerous team to watch in their bracket or in their region as well.
Exactly. Yeah. They might have gotten ranked because they might have got a seeded 2 because they have the best player in the bracket, possibly.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, you're right though. You're right. Cause they had times where they look like they might be getting exposed by some really good teams that are more balanced. They don't have to score inside as much because we know that's Nalissa Smith owns the paint any game they play in. So when other teams have really strong guards, good scoring guards, they do struggle. So that's a good point. They may be at risk as well.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about the bitter way that their March Madness ended last year in that game against Michigan, I believe it was. And it's funny because I'm looking at my bracket and I'm like, I kind of want to see that matchup again as we kind of get, more and more deep, into into those games in that Wichita region. And I think that it's going to really be interesting because, again, Baylor is one of those teams that they're trying to prove a point. And so they're like, hey, people might think we shouldn't have been the second seed, but we're going to show you why. And everybody that's coming to play us, you better get ready.
Right. Yep. So for me, I was looking at what region is this? The Greensboro region.
Mm-hmm.
And Iowa State seeded third. Iowa State is a good team. They're the best 3-point shooting team in the country. But when they face a team that is athletic, they get exposed every single time. And usually their best competition are the games that they lost. And then, teams that aren't very good shooting teams, they could shoot out the gym. I think they set a record for threes in a half this year. So I think they're a team a scrappy Georgia team. Who else is in their bracket? Iowa, of course. They don't have anyone that can guard. They don't play very good defense. They kind of play what people are really critical about the Warriors playing, where we're just going to outshoot you, outscore you every game. And, in March Madness, that doesn't work a lot of times.
Yeah, that's right. And here's the key, right? If your shots are falling, it's a beautiful thing. But if they're not, what is what else can your offense provide, right? And so that's the tricky part about it. And, Iowa, that's another team I would agree with you, right? Are they really a 3 seed? I don't know that I think they are. But, Caitlin Clark, on that team, I think that, she gets a little bit of undershine, because she's, a great player, great 3-point shooter. But she's not on, the top, they're not even in the top 5, right? In the top 25 in the country. But, we'll see what they do. And like you said, they can shoot your lights out, but, those shots aren't always going to fall when you want and need them to. So what else do they have to rely on? We'll see if they're able to keep up.
Right. And, Iowa and Iowa State are in the same bracket, and they could meet. And that's two teams that shoot very well. Iowa actually has a transfer from Iowa State.
Right.
That starts. That could be a real shootout. But again, both teams are, when it comes to athletic players, other athletic teams that don't need the 3-point shot, they have a hard time. And neither team is very good on defense. So I think both of them are very maybe a little bit high, but I think they're high because the committee probably wants to see players like Ashley Jones from Iowa State, and obviously Caitlin Clark in the Final Four. So
absolutely, yeah.
All right. Any other seeds that were interesting to you?
I think those were the interesting ones to me. I mean, I'll say this, another one I'm watching is Georgia, right? They are a serious competitor, in the SEC, and I think they are. Teams may look at them, okay, they're a 6 seed. Yeah, I mean, I think their seeding is appropriate, but Joni Taylor's got those girls playing. I mean, they've got, what's the young lady's name? Q Morrison, of course, Jenna Stady, and several others, on that team. And those girls are very well coached. They're athletic. Their defense is nasty. So I'm like, hey, you coming through Georgia, you better get ready. Because that's a team that could catch some off guard, right, who are unfamiliar, which is another crazy part of March Madness. You're not playing teams that you're comfortable with or that right, what they do and how they operate. So you really got to stick to the bread and butter of what you do, and that's going to get you the win.
Exactly. And that team, that scrappy team, that they're the ones that would beat Iowa State, would beat Iowa, because they come after you the whole game, and they have a lot of fire. The bench is always riled up. I love watching them play. It's a fun culture out there.
Absolutely, yes. That would definitely be a fun matchup to see if they were playing either Iowa State or Iowa. That would be a good one. But I think Georgia would take it. But we'll see what happens.
Anything can happen.
Yes.
All right. So give me some players to watch. For those who may not have been following women's college basketball as much as we have, I have a couple players. Give me some of your players that you're really looking to see that can make a big difference. Offense, defense, maybe the X factor for a team. Give me some players.
All right, sure. I've got a few of them here for you. And of course, I got to start with Ryan Howard from Kentucky, right? I mean, she is one that to me has a really strong game. But I will say, for me personally anyway, the missing piece of her game, and maybe people think I'm crazy for this, but I just got to say it and keep it real. The missing piece for me in Rhyne Howard's game is that takeover factor, right? When her team really needs her to step up. It's like for me, you know, when the lights are on, she's ready to play. But I'm like, you got to do that dirty work throughout the season to really let people know, right, that you about it. So that to me is the missing piece, right? And sometimes I would even say, you know, a little bit of, you know, there's a little bit of nonchalant, you know, in her game as well, her demeanor, but the girl can play. There's no doubt about it. And again, coming off of the SEC championship win, right, over South Carolina, no less. Kentucky is hot right now. And I think that Rhyne Howard is definitely going to, you know, she's definitely going to suit up and lace up the tennis shoes, and really she's going to be ready to play and make some noise in this tournament.
She is tough. I mean, wingspan, she has range, she can handle the ball, play every position. I'm completely with you, because it is the fourth quarters down the stretch where, yeah, she's out there, but she doesn't demand the ball. They end up having a lot of turnovers. She doesn't come get it from her players, and they just keep running the offense, the go-to guy of the team.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think for any of the WNBA scouts that have questions, they will be watching. So now is the time to turn it on and show what you got.
Absolutely. Okay. I'll go with mine. Virginia Tech, Elizabeth Kitley. I think that women's college basketball this year has been such a great year for the big girls, for the centers, the power forwards, and Elizabeth Kitley. Most say she has the best footwork in college basketball. She has been dominant all season. She's a mismatch. She can score from anywhere, in the paint, outside the paint. She's a beast on the boards, both hands, hooks both ways. I think she's someone who can really change a game offensively and defensively. She averages 3 blocks a game. I think she's going to be scary for any team that faces her in the Spokane region.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I love that you brought her up, because I think this has been the year of the post players. And the thing about it is, right, they're able to do more than just, you know, put their back to the basket, right? We're seeing more post players that can step out, make the mid-range shot, you know, come set a screen in the high paint and get their player open and, you know, dish and pass the ball. So, you know, she's another one of those players that, you know, can fly under your radar. But if you know her, you know she's good.
Yeah, great vision. She's someone who likes to start the play from the top of the key, high screen and rolls. So, yeah, she's my first player to watch. Who's next?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to follow you on that note. And I want to talk about Angel Reese from Maryland. I mean, she has such an athletic frame.
Yes.
She moves well, and she's just such a dominant presence on the floor for the Terrapins. And I mean, whatever her team needs, Angel is going to deliver. So I definitely think she's another one that could fly under people's radar. And, you know, they wouldn't know her, but if you play against her, you definitely know who she is, and you know that you got to be on her.
And they're set up for that 4-5 matchup in the second round.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that would be amazing. That would be really, really, really fun to watch. Yeah. Okay. My next one is a guard, Tahina Powell from Oregon.
Oh, yes.
And she is the ultimate X factor for this team. She's someone who can explode scoring wise. Her averages weren't as high as I think it looks like when you're watching her, because her points are always spectacular. She's quick. She just does a lot for this team as far as facilitating and as far as being a scoring threat. I think she's someone that could really change games for Oregon's team throughout the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you need, right? Always, and particularly during this time of year. And I mean, she's that player that's going to step up and give you exactly what the team needs. So it's going to be fun to watch her.
Yep. She's a big time momentum player, next to Sedona Prince, their post, and who's been consistent all season. But it's those games where Pow steps up that they really beat the teams that they may not be supposed to beat. You know, that's how they upset teams during the season. So we'll see how that works during the tournament.
Yes, absolutely. It's going to be a good one.
Who's next?
So I'm going to go. We talked about her a little bit earlier. I have Caitlin Clark on my list as well, but that's the one we just talked about a little bit earlier. But I want to also, we can't forget about yes, I mean, you cannot say enough about Caitlin Clark. But before we get to her, I want to also talk about Nalissa Smith from Baylor. She's another one that's trying to, really, I'll say, solidify why she's not only a WNBA player, but should be a top pick. And maybe even in some people's mind, the number one pick. I mean, she is a phenomenal player. She's had a phenomenal senior season. And, she just hit recently in their Big 12 championship game. Unfortunately, they lost, but she hit the 2,000 career point mark. And I just love the versatility in her game. You look at her and say, oh, okay, she's a forward, but, she can get the rebound, take it coast to coast, either dish to an open teammate or continue and make her own shot, take and make her own shot. And so I think she really shakes up and she will challenge other teams' defenses, right? If you're a big player, you may not be accustomed to guarding another post player who can also play like a guard, right? That's a serious challenge. And so you might put so much attention on her. She's still going to get her points, but she also is good at finding her teammates as well. And when you leave Baylor shooters open, I don't think that's something you want to do.
Right. She is so athletically gifted. It is just ridiculous. Yeah. And the more you watch her, the more you realize she has way more elements in her game and has improved every single season. She has like a turnaround fadeaway now. She has hooks on both sides. She doesn't just use her athleticism anymore. Now she has these post moves. She has these look-offs, these passes. I mean, she's another one I cannot say enough about. She's just ridiculous. Seriously, she's great. Great player.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I think because she doesn't have the flash of a Caitlin Clark or a Paige Beckers, who are obviously amazing players as well, but she doesn't have the guard flash, so you don't really get to see how incredible she is until you see her matched up with another really good post, which she's definitely going to have to run into throughout this tournament, especially in their bracket.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, their region is definitely a good one. And so I know she's ready, right? But, you're going to get a chance to, showcase and see what she can do.
Yep. So this one for me is kind of a sleeper, and most people don't know her, but she's at FGCU, and it's Kirsten Bell.
Absolutely.
And I know I talked about Elizabeth Kitley at Virginia Tech, and they match up in the first round. So one of these girls will be done after the first day. But Kirsten Bell is the small ball coach's dream. She's a forward who can shoot the ball, who can handle the ball. She likes to get the rebounds and start the break, start the transition. She can pass. She can really do everything. She uses her weight well on mismatches. She's just an electrifying player for a small school that is Florida Gulf Coast that plays a small ball lineup with her at the 5 most of the time. Mm-hmm. And obviously, I just mentioned Elizabeth Kitley, so that matchup is going to be awkward. But FGCU is an amazing shooting team, similar to how I mentioned Iowa and Iowa State. Everyone on the team can shoot threes. So I think she's someone to watch. If they make it past Virginia Tech, it'll be because of her.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you this, Tyler. I'm thinking that Florida Gulf Coast might pull the upset on Virginia Tech, and it's definitely going to be a good one because I don't know if Kenny Brooks and the Hokies are ready for what Florida Gulf Coast is going to bring, but it's definitely going to be one of the more exciting first round matchups, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I looked throughout the first round for a long time, and I cannot find one I'm more excited to watch.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I'm definitely tuning in for sure. Yeah. You have any more players to watch?
I think that's all I have. I'm not even going to talk about Caitlin Clark again because, we've already talked about, how great she is. And I think a lot of people are, getting hip to who she is and what she brings to the table. So I think that's all the ones that I have.
I will say most people already know who Paige Beckers is, but coming off this injury, I'm really looking to see how she steps up and how the UConn team, who had a lot of girls injured for the whole season, how these other players who did step up in their absence will acclimate to them coming back, right? Because Gino likes to only play 7 players a night, maybe 8. So he's had to go deep almost to the 8th, 9th, and 10th girl on the team.
Mm-hmm.
So how is that going to work with the starters back in there? Is he going to play them more, or are they just going to fade into black going into the tournament? I'm really curious to see how that happens. That's not really a player to watch. I said Paige because how well she plays will determine how much he has to go into the bench, because she is coming off a pretty big injury. In the last 2 games of the season, she still was kind of ginger on her leg. And I'm curious to see if she's going to be able to step up and be the best player on the team, which she's going to have to be, I think, this year, because their region is tough. Is also really, really tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you just highlighted something that's really key there, because I think that it's absolutely right, a valid and fair question about how is their lineup going to adjust, right? Having her back as she's trying to, get her groove back as far as coming back from her injury. However, the upside is Gino knows that because he's played those players on the bench, right? Having to have gone deeper into that bench, those players, they are now ready, right? They're in their flow. And so if you need to go back to, hey, we got to go to player 7, 8, or 9, we know that they're ready, right? We hope that Paige is at her best and ready to rock and roll. But if there's any issues, any trepidation, she's worried, or whatever the case may be, shots not falling, we know we can go to player 8 and we don't have to worry about, oh crap, is there going to be some drop off? We know they're good. So I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see, because we, like you said, we don't normally get to see player 8 and 9 off the UConn bench, or even 10. Right. So now that we know they're capable, they're in their flow, you're bringing Paige back, I think UConn can still make a good run at this tournament.
Yeah, me too, for sure. For sure. So we talked about the seeding a little bit earlier. Tell me some of the most dangerous low seeds to you. I think I have 3 for me. Tell me yours.
Okay, well, the one that I have, we've talked about them a little bit, right, is Florida Gulf Coast. Yes. I think that for me, with them, we're looking at the top 25. The regular season rankings I'm referring to, they're ranked number 23 in the country, right? But their record is 29-2. So I think they could be that quote underdog team to really come in and shake up the tournament this year. And I said this a moment ago, right? They're matched up in the first round against Virginia Tech. And it's going to be a good one. I mean, I'm going to go out on the limb and say I think they might be able to upset the Hokies, but if not, they're definitely going to give them a good run for their money and let people know, oh, Florida Gulf Coast, we slept on them, but they're good.
Yeah, absolutely. They beat 3 tournament teams. Mm-hmm. I mean, they beat LSU earlier this season.
Right.
I want to say they beat Princeton. I didn't look at the record, but I think they beat Princeton as well. So they have these games that people wouldn't watch because they think, oh, they're going to beat the crap out of FGCU. But man, I mean, they battle, and they, like I mentioned earlier, they play a small ball 5-out offense that is dangerous, is really, really dangerous. So, I mean, that's a great one. They are a 12 seed, which is low for a team with only 2 losses in the season.
Right, so, absolutely. But I think, again, they're kind of that sleeper who's like, hey, we're going to put them in the tournament, but they're not going to be, highly seeded. And so I think they're coming in with the point to prove. So I think that's the one that that gets me. But I know you said you've got a few, so I want to hear what you're thinking.
Well, that was one of mine. So
okay, all right.
Another one of mine is Creighton. And Creighton is a super balanced team. I think they had 3 or 4 girls average in double figures at one point this season, like in like a 5-game stretch this season. They move the ball really well. They play really good defense. In women's basketball, balance is so much more important than it seems, and especially more important than in men's basketball, because, a lot of times you may have an NBA prospect on your team that averages 25, 30 points a game. That doesn't really happen in women's basketball. So when you have a team that can get 4 or 5 girls in double figures a lot of nights, and you can say Creighton's, you can say their competition isn't great, but I think they're a team that at any given night could catch fire and have some girls off the bench with 10 points. They're going to be hard to beat. They could put up a lot of points.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point that you make there about, it's kind of a different style of play, so to speak, between the men's and women's game. But I think that, the way that they're going, hey, they're really on a roll. And I mean, there's something dangerous for real.
Yep. What's next?
Let me see here. So tell me, so we got Florida Gulf Coast.
Yeah, and Creighton.
And we got Creighton. Let me see. I want to hear your other one, so to make sure I don't repeat what you're going to say.
My next one is Villanova.
Okay.
It's a very similar situation to Creighton. Villanova has had battles against a lot of tournament teams this year. And throughout the year, they've been considered dangerous. But coming in at 11th seed, I thought was pretty low for them, especially seeing teams like BYU is 6, Ole Miss is 7. I think Villanova is just as good as those teams. UCF is 7. I definitely think Villanova can compete with them, if not be, to me, I think they're obviously better than a lot of those teams in a tough conference. But I think there are teams that could surprise. They're a team that could surprise a lot of teams, a lot of higher seeds.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Another one that I'm going to throw out there that we haven't talked about yet here is Notre Dame. I think they've played a really good season. Ncaa Ivy's got those girls really playing well, and I forget her. I know she comes from the famous girls basketball family, women's basketball, the Mabrys. That girl is really on fire. I mean, she steps up at the right time, and I just feel like Notre Dame has all the right pieces. I mean, they've got shooters, they've got aggressive defenders. I mean, they rebound, get the ball, they're out in transition, and they're definitely one to watch. And I think that we have them here in the Bridgeport region. They could be facing, NC State, Oklahoma, Kentucky, many different, options that they might be able to face. And I think that it's going to be a good test for them. But I think that they are well positioned and poised to come into this region and make some noise.
Yeah, and Olivia Miles, who is one of my favorite players in all of women's college basketball. Great passer. Her vision is just amazing. But I think she's had problems with knowing when to step up and score, knowing when to be the facilitator. I think that's going to be their biggest test going into the tournament. How can they get her to step up and, be a bigger scorer for them? Because I think sometimes she'll spend a whole quarter and just not take any shots, thinking, oh yeah, I'm getting assists or I'm getting some passes, even though the girls aren't finishing. I think she's good enough to step up and be their go-to player, but which they'll need, especially in the Bridgeport region, because eventually someone is going to have to play UConn at home. So we'll see what happens there. But I'm with you. I think Notre Dame is pretty low for how talented they could be. I think their potential is a lot higher than 5.
Right, absolutely. But I will say, I think that's a good problem to have, right? That we're saying that so many teams are, quote, lower seeded than we think they should be. It just kind of, really just drives home the point about it's anybody's game at this tournament. I mean, these teams are playing well. They all have their respective strengths. And you put all them together in a tournament, it's definitely going to be fire. So I think it's going to be good. It's exciting.
Yep. Okay. You want to go to predictions, or do you have more?
No, that's all I have. We can do predictions. Let's do it.
So who do you got in your Final Four?
As I sat down to fill out this bracket, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is every year. I'm just like, the thing that's funny is I'm like, I know too much about basketball to really be good at these brackets, because I feel like you just never know. And the people that I'm in the bracket pool with, I'm like, the ones who don't know basketball are always the one to win, because I'm probably too much in my head about, all the little nuances and stuff about, who's doing what and everything. But here it is. Here's what I have for the Final Four as far as who's coming out of each region. Now, don't quote me on this because I could be wrong, but here's what I'm thinking right now, today, in this moment. I think from the Greensboro region, I have it coming down to South Carolina versus Iowa. And I think I'm going to say that Iowa might come out of that one. And so I'm going to put Iowa coming out on top in the Greensboro region. I think I got to go with Louisville out of that Wichita region. Of course, I'm going to go for Stanford out of the Spokane, and I'm going to give it to Kentucky coming out of the Bridgeport. So I think that's going to be my Final Four.
Kentucky coming out of Bridgeport. Wow.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Okay. I had Iowa as well. I have Stanford as well. Now for Bridgeport and Wichita, I have UConn and I have Baylor.
Okay.
And
All right. I like that.
I think that if Baylor can get past Michigan, which Smith and Hillman, I mean, those two playing against each other. We didn't mention Naz Hillman earlier, but another amazing post player that dominated this season as well as last season, as we all
Oh
know.
yeah.
I think if they can get past that, I'm looking at Tennessee. I'm taking them over Tennessee. I'm looking at Oregon. I think Oregon could be a nice matchup for them, but I just don't see anyone even remotely stopping Alyssa Smith. And when I say remotely stopping, I mean she's giving you, a 30 points a game, potentially at least 25. So then the rest of the team really only needs 40 points to beat a lot of these teams. And Louisville's a really good team, very well coached, very good system, but they have some lulls sometimes where Haley Van Lith doesn't step up. They shoot themselves out the games. I took Baylor in the Wichita one, but
Okay.
I'm not mad at Louisville at all. Obviously, the number one seed, so I'm not. Obviously, it makes sense for them to come out of it, but I'm taking Baylor, and then Bridgeport. I got to go with UConn, especially since eventually they'll be playing at home. They're finally pretty much full strength. And like we mentioned earlier, the depth. Although I have reservations about whether Paige is going to step or how Gino is going to coach, they just have so much talent, and I just look at a lot of the other teams and say, man, UConn has girls that come off the bench that would start on a lot of these teams,
Right.
And that's always tough, whether Gino plays them or not. There's talented players that come off the bench that would be stars on other teams. So I'm thinking Paige comes back full strength. Fudd has really stepped up for them. I don't see anyone beating them, but to your point, Kentucky, I think Kentucky has the best player in their region. So that's always the X factor, right? I think Paige is a better player when healthy, but this year I'm taking Howard. I don't think anyone on UConn can guard or stop Howard. So it's going to be interesting. So I got UConn, Iowa, Baylor, and Stanford. I think Stanford is just a well-oiled machine.
Really absolutely. Yeah. Tara Vanderbilt definitely has them well coached, right? And they've got the skill to match it. I think they fit well with the offensive scheme that, Tara Vanderbilt has them running. And I want to go back to what you said about UConn coming out of the Bridgeport region. It totally slipped my mind that, they're basically at home.
They are. Yeah.
And so it's like, they not only, you don't have to travel, right, to where you're playing, right? You're already in that area. So I think that definitely plays to their advantage. We talk about the injuries that come into play. You don't have to worry about, I got to rehab when I get there, or, whatever the recovery plan is. True. You still have to do that, right? But you're home doing it, right? So I think
I didn't even think about that. Good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that they definitely are one that I'm personally, honestly, if I'm being for real, they're one that I'm sleeping on. But if they get that stuff going, they're definitely going to be a threat coming out of that Bridgeport region. And if we get a Kentucky UConn matchup, which I think we could, that's going to be a good one to watch.
Very, very good one. Yeah.
And definitely, if, like you said, Paige is really, if she comes to play, which we expect her to, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be a good matchup to see what UConn is going to toss at Kentucky and how does Kentucky respond.
Absolutely. One problem is Kentucky does turn the ball over often.
Oh, yeah.
UConn is the best fast break team probably in all of women's college basketball. And it's just because they capitalize on every single turnover. So if they can hold on to the ball and get Howard going in some consistency in their offense, they can beat UConn. It's possible. Definitely possible.
Yeah, it is definitely possible. I'm going to tell you this, man. It is definitely possible.
So neither of us picked South Carolina to come out of Greensboro. Why is that?
Man, and this is a tough one because I am a South Carolina fan. I mean, to the point where I was literally 2 seconds from booking the flight to Nashville the day of to go see that championship. But here's my concern with South Carolina, okay? Mm-hmm. They are a great team. Of course, they've got Aaliyah Boston. They have great guard play. It's just so many good things, right? And not even to mention, right, they're coached by the Don Staley, one of my favorite players and now coach.
Yes.
But my reservations about South Carolina is not only how they ended the SEC in the regular season, and not even just losing the championship, right? But let's park there for a moment, right? They had a 15-point lead. I don't know if they got complacent or they were like, hey, we guess this is over. We won. But they lost that 15-point lead and ended up losing down the stretch by, what was it, like 2 or 4 points or something like that. It was very close.
It ended up being 4, I think.
Yeah, it was very close unnecessarily. But South Carolina, they are turnover prone. When their shots are falling, it's great, right? And they play, of course, through Aaliyah Boston. But, just, again, coming down to the stretch of the regular season, I don't know if South Carolina has enough gas in the tank to pull it off. I hope they do. And time will tell, but that's just a few of my reservations. And I think that they got to really channel that SEC loss, right? They have two choices here: to really get down on themselves and be like, oh, okay, I guess we're done, or no, we're not done, and get ready to go to war in this March Madness tournament. So if they come out of Greensboro, I'll definitely be happy as a South Carolina fan. But they got some things to clean up, I think, in order to do that, and that's what kind of makes me nervous.
I'm also a South Carolina fan, and I agree with everything you said. For me, they go with a kind of a 3 forward lineup and 2 guards, which, generally in women's basketball, the small forward is just like a slightly taller guard. But they kind of go with really like 3 power forwards in the game all the time. Don't really have a true center and don't really have a true small forward. But, I think Beal would be a power forward on most other teams. She's just, pretty fast for her height. I think that they're going to have a really hard time with shooting teams. Like I mentioned earlier, Iowa State. If South Carolina can't stop the 3, they have nothing to come back. Like, they don't shoot well enough to get back into games,
right? To
me. And defensively, Henderson and Cook are, pests, but, they get in foul trouble a lot, especially Cook gets in foul trouble a lot. She shoots them out of games sometimes. If they don't get opportunities at the free throw line, they're definitely at risk of getting beat. When you play good defense against them, if you keep them out of the paint, you limit their rebounds, they have a really hard time. And I think they've actually, of all the teams that, some teams have lost games here and there, they're the ones that really show you how to beat them when they lose games.
Absolutely.
Like, it's a different thing. You lose a game, we lost because, or whatever, another girl on the other team, player on the other team got hot. It happens. But when you crumble, like you mentioned, the 15-point lead, you crumble something like that, or you lose to a team that was coming in there ready for you, it means teams can game plan against you.
Absolutely.
I saw what Miami did in the ACC tournament. I think they're a team that, if you're sleeping on them, they could surprise you. I've seen North Carolina, great culture, obviously historic culture. Arizona, great coaching. I've seen a lot of these teams beat giants, and South Carolina isn't even really a giant. I mean, they deserve the 1 seed, but like we mentioned, they have a lot of issues. And
I think what you said is key. They show you how to beat them.
They do.
And they make it very obvious. Yeah,
right on a platter. And as much as I love Dawn, I think Dawn is a really good coach, fashion icon now.
Oh yeah.
I think that sometimes she struggles to get the best out of some of her players. I think Boston always brings it, but sometimes I see Cook needing maybe a little more coaching, Sometimes I think Dawn thinks, mid game is not worth it. Just take her out. We're just gonna go with this other team, opposed to kind of uplifting Cook to step up. Now, I shouldn't say uplift because it may not be that, but she doesn't bring the best out of Cook that I've seen every game. Which games where I think, man, Cook would be ready for this game. Like, she's very competitive. She's attacking all the time, but there's some games where I'm like, man, this is her time to step up. I don't see it. That scares me a lot, especially going into the tournament.
Absolutely. And I want to also piggyback off of that, Tyler. I mean, going back to your point about Dawn Staley, I think that she gets out coached as well, right? She knows that, hey, this is the game plan that we came in with, right? Mm-hmm. But, thinking about down the stretch in that Kentucky game in the SEC championship, half the timeout is over and she has not even drawn up a play for those girls. And Kyra Elsie, the entire timeout is there. Look, right. Do this, do that, if that, change this and all. And I think that lack of preparation showed in the last 2 minutes of that game. And I think that's one thing, not only is it a players' game, it's time for the players to show up. The coaches got to be ready as well, right? Having a game plan is one thing, but you got to be resilient and say, hey, look, this isn't working, let's switch gears and let's do this, or so-and-so do this. And you also make another great point as well about being able to motivate your players in game, right, and bring the best out of them. And I think that's another area of improvement for Dawn Staley. No shade, we love her because she's a great coach, certainly a great player, but I think that just her making those tweaks will better position, her team and her as a coach to really be able to get over that hump that we've been talking about.
Absolutely. Okay. So that's our tournament stuff. You had some other stuff you wanted to mention.
Man, I just had to pull this out and just say this. I mean, we talked about, Aaliyah Boston earlier, and, in reference to South Carolina and how great of contributions, she makes. And, hey, kudos to her because, I mean, she really is a difference maker in the South Carolina team offensively and defensively. And speaking of offense, right, she recently this season broke the SEC record for, the number of double doubles in a single season. I believe it was 19 was the record set by Sylvia Fowles, and Aaliyah Boston has surpassed that. But the crazy thing for me is Anissa Morrow from DePaul had done that long before, exceeded that record. And nobody's really, I'm not going to say nobody. A lot of people, or not many people, are talking about that. And I'm like, okay, I get it. DePaul may not be the number one team in the country, but let's not sleep on these accomplishments. And I will say, of course, right, they weren't necessarily saying that Aaliyah Boston is going to have the NCAA record. That nobody ever said that. They're just kind of, playing on, hey, she's about to, beat Sylvia Fowles' record of 19. But I'm thinking, okay, Anissa Morrow, that's another player I guess we could have talked about, earlier about people not really knowing her and, what she brings to the table.
Right.
Overall and specifically for her team. Because I'm like, why nobody's talking about her? I mean, she had far past that record of 19, but you didn't hear about that. So I'm like, okay, people, we got to, shine the light across, right, the NCAA and not just really focus on one player or one team or, one particular conference.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's tough when a lot of times in women's college basketball, the scales are always tipped to the top 10 teams, and everyone after that, maybe top 15, from 16 down to the unranked teams, just are rarely talked about, if ever talked about, unless they have someone like Caitlin Clark who's breaking all of college basketball across men's and women's basketball records. These other teams really go without being talked about, and I'm glad you brought it up because it needs to be. There's a lot of other amazing women's basketball players out there that don't get brought up. There's teams, smaller teams like the South Dakota States that will have a player breaking the school scoring record and we would never hear about it, you know? But yeah, that's a great point. Great point.
Yeah. And I know that it's tough, right? Because there's so much talent
Yeah.
And there's but so little, airtime to talk about it. And so, I just try to shine a light where I can, because it's like there's so many players out here, that really are making noise on their teams and doing great things that we don't hear about or we don't talk about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, on that note, this was great. I really enjoyed that. We got to do it again mid-tournament. Got to have you back.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great. This was so fun, and I appreciate the invite. Glad to be a part of it.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Stay tuned for the men's basketball tournament breakdown, and see you guys next time.
All right. See ya.
All right. Cool. Stop that.
So we're here with Tyler. Welcome back. You've been a guest on the show before. Brought you back because we got a deep dive March Madness going in. Exciting time. How's it going?
It's going well, man. I'm excited. We got Thursday, Friday, 15 games each day, I think. No, let's see, 64 teams, so 16, 17 games, 15, 16, whatever. We got a lot of games these first 2 days.
First round, you're glued to the TV.
Yes, and we're going to see upsets. This year is a lot of parity in college basketball. So I don't think a 16 seed will win, but you never know. And 15 seed, I'm not betting on it, but 14 seeds will win, 13 seeds will win, and it's just going to be exciting, man. Who knows what will happen?
All right, so since you're talking about the lower seeds to start with, obviously, I think we talked about this last time you were on, but me and Tyler haven't been in tune with college basketball this year as much. And specifically, the lower seed teams is hard to catch consistently. So give me a couple teams you're excited about. Give me a couple teams that could upset somebody in the first round.
So the first one I have to talk about is, and it's also one of my most surprising seedings, is South Dakota State. I'm surprised that they're 13. And they're actually 2-point underdogs to Providence. A 4-13 game, they're only 2-point dogs. So I really think that they're going to give Providence a lot of trouble. The one thing I'm concerned about with those guys is because when you see mid-majors, oftentimes they're old. They have 3, 4, 5 starting seniors. South Dakota State doesn't have that, but they have a great team. They've won 30 games this year. They have not lost since December.
So they haven't lost at all.
They were 18-0 in conference play, and then they ran the table in the conference tournament. And they're a 13 seed. So I really like South Dakota State. Providence is a good basketball team. The Big East was strong this year, but the thing about Providence is they don't really have that go-to guy down the stretch. When South Dakota State makes a run, they can say, all right, we're putting the ball in this guy's hands, and we're going to let him make something happen. So that's the first game I'm looking at for a big upset. It's
interesting that it's only a 2-point difference.
Right.
4 and 13, that's usually not the case.
That goes to show you that South Dakota State was probably misseeded slightly.
Now, is there a lower seed you're excited about more so because you're nervous about the team that's going to be playing against them?
As far as I think that a top seed may struggle?
Yeah.
Well, Baylor could struggle, but they're a 1 facing a 16. So, and I know nothing about the team they're playing. So Baylor, the reason I'm concerned about them is they lost their best perimeter big for the year. Chama Achachua. That's a tough name to say, but they lost him. And their leading scorer, LJ Cryer, has been out for the last 15 games. And they're expecting him back, but the concern is chemistry. When you insert your leading scorer back in the lineup,
what was the injury?
Ankle, foot. It's a lower leg injury. And they've been saying we're expecting him back. He hasn't played yet. So the ideal scenario for Baylor is to ease him in that 16-1 game, get a big lead, let him play 20 minutes, and then they could go from there. But if they get into a close game, and you never know what could happen. But I don't expect our number 1 seed to lose. We never do. It's only happened once.
Yeah.
So,
I was just wondering, with Baylor, seeing them struggle a couple times, is the perimeter shooting going to keep them advancing?
Right. That's a big question mark.
I'm not sure.
And the thing about Baylor is they're always so tough, man. They always play tough defense. They always are a grit and grind team, which is great. And they won the national championship last year.
Right.
But the thing with them is they don't have the scoring they had last year. Davion Mitchell was one of the best players in the nation. So they lost a lot from that team. They have a great coach. So, you know, they should make a Sweet 16 run, but they are vulnerable right
now. So moving forward into a little bit more of the overall tournament, give me which side do you think will be the toughest to get through?
So the top seeds are the best in the South region, I think. Top to bottom, I'd have to go with the East. But when you look at the South region, you've got Arizona 1, okay, Villanova 2. Villanova is old. Now I like old in the Ncaa tournament. And then you have Tennessee 3, who was the clear misseeding. They should have absolutely been a 2. So Arizona, Villanova, and Tennessee all in the same bracket. That's a good bracket. And then you also round it out with Illinois and Houston, who are two really solid basketball teams.
What do you think about the Midwest?
The Midwest. Well, let's scroll up here. Okay, so we're talking about the bottom region, Kansas, Auburn.
I don't trust Auburn.
Now that I look back at that region, I was going to say, I think this region could be absolute carnage. I think you could see so many upsets.
Yeah, because with Kansas, who's the big that nobody could stop from rebounding?
David McCormick is probably who you're thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. With Kansas, like, they're so hot and cold that Wisconsin to me is perfectly capable of beating them. Iowa, very capable. Who else is in there? Miami's another team. Providence is a team like you talked about, but they could easily heat up.
Right.
So and with Auburn, Auburn kind of closing the year out on a down note, I would say. Very inconsistent. I think it's gonna be wild in there.
Absolutely, man. I'm with you 100% on that. You've got Colgate. So you mentioned Wisconsin. I like Wisconsin, but Colgate has a really strong team. They were in the tournament last year and they made a run at somebody. I'm forgetting who they made a run at, but you've got Colgate facing Wisconsin and you've got Richmond facing Iowa. Richmond is very old. They have Jacob Gilliard, a senior. They have Grant Golden, a senior. Nate Ko, a senior. They've been together for 4 years, all of those guys. So Keegan Murray is a one-man show for Iowa. So if he has an off game, I could see Iowa losing in the first round.
Oof, it's gonna be interesting.
It's crazy.
Like seeing brackets like this it's encouraged me more and more to turn my brain off.
Right.
Because I don't want to predict which team heats up, you know, if there's going to be an injury or if somebody's not going to play well. What do you think?
One of the hardest.
Go ahead.
That's one of the hardest things to do is to really pick. I think anyone that cares about their bracket, I think you just should pick who you like. If you like Colgate, pick Colgate because no one really knows what's going to happen. It's so crazy. So a lot of times I would struggle with picking a 14 seed to win. You know, I'd be like, man, I can't pick a 14 over a 3. No, I think you just go in. If you're feeling it, ride with it. You don't really have to have a great reason for it because there's going to be upsets and great teams are going to lose. It happens every year.
What are some of the things you look for? Like you said, like we kind of talked about not overthinking it, obviously. But you did mention some things like, you know, the older rosters, the rosters were playing well towards the end of the year. Any other things you're specifically looking at from these teams that like get you more excited about them?
Absolutely. The biggest thing for me, I look back to Oral Roberts last year. They had Max Asmus and Kevin O'Banner. I look for a dynamic guard and a dynamic big.
Yes.
If you have both of those, you have a good shot. And tonight's playing game, Indiana and Wyoming, I think the winner of that game is going to the Sweet 16. You have Trace Jackson Davis and Xavier Johnson, dynamic guard, dynamic big. And then you have Hunter Maldonado and Graham Ike from Wyoming, same thing. So I think the winner of that game is going to win some games for sure.
Indiana's interesting. I haven't seen them in a while, but very exciting team.
Yeah, and they look really bad for stretches. And
Yeah.
Big Ten tournament came around. They heated up. Xavier Johnson's playing out of his mind right now. So I like them.
Speaking of teams that heat up, I got to bring it up because I caught them just beating the brakes off Duke the other day. Virginia Tech. Very low seed, very inconsistent year. What do you think about them?
So this is wild. Quick story. My sister is a huge Duke fan. So she wanted to go see Coach K one last time. And tickets were outrageous price. So obviously we weren't going to the North Carolina game. She wanted to go to a game in Cameron. And we didn't want to go see him play Division III, win by 60. We wanted to see him play an ACC team. And I told her, I said, look, beyond North Carolina, the team I'd like to see play that I think could give them a run is Virginia Tech. And so we went to the Virginia Tech Duke game in Cameron, and Tech was winning at halftime. And it was a great game. So I've liked them all year long. I'm glad that they hit their stride at the right time. I think they could be dangerous, but I don't like their first round matchup very well just because Texas, I feel like Texas is undersold a little bit. They've underperformed, but they have so much talent. It feels like they have too much talent to lose early.
I don't know, man. Texas, to me, again, seeing them sporadically, but like the Texas Tech game a few weeks ago didn't look very good. Another team who's had an up and down year.
Yes, for sure. Unpredictable. You never know. Texas Tech could lose. I mean, Texas could lose by 20 to Virginia Tech, and they could win by double digits just as easily. So I do like Virginia Tech, though, man. They have a very good team.
Okay, interesting. Speaking of Duke, unfortunately for them, they're kind of in my low lights right now because I did watch the North Carolina game also. How do you feel about North Carolina? Because they're another team who's heating up late in the year.
Man, we had to come back to this because I don't know if you remember last time I was on the pod. I said basically North Carolina sucks, and we all laughed about it. And
it did suck, yes.
That Duke game, we finally saw their ceiling. We saw what they can be.
I was shocked in the second half.
Yeah,
it was like, man, they look more experienced. They just look more like ready for the moment.
Absolutely. Man. The thing about North Carolina, so they have a great first round matchup with Marquette because Marquette likes to get up and down. I like teams that like to run when they play Carolina. If you slow down the pace, it could get tough for them. So when they play Baylor, if they play Baylor, I just talked about Baylor struggling. So Carolina could have a chance, but it's going to come down to how the game is officiated because Baylor plays great defense, tough defense. And every time Carolina has played a tough defensive team, it feels like they pass the ball around the perimeter. They jack up bad shots. They get out of what they want to do. So if Baylor can force Carolina out of what they want to do, I think they probably will lose to Baylor in the second round.
Who's Caleb Love, right? That's the guard for UNC. He's very skill oriented. I would like to see him like really commit to getting inside a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, he could be a first round pick, man. Like you say, his skills are really, you might have 5 or 6 guys in college basketball that can do what he can do. But when you add in the bad about Caleb Love, that's when you say, okay, is he even draftable? Because he has poor shot selection at times. He's turnover prone. The effort goes up and goes down. The reason Carolina beat Duke is because they put RJ Davis at point guard. Let Caleb play off the ball, took the ball out of his hands some. He's a really good player. I'm not bashing Caleb Love. I like him a lot, and I hope he comes back for one more season in North Carolina. But him handling the ball 60% of the time, it can get ugly at times.
And who was the other guy I saw that I couldn't tell if he was really that good or not? The white dude who's a good shooter.
Brady Manick.
Yes. Is he really that good? Because he looked pretty unstoppable also.
He is. So I'm a North Carolina fan. I don't know if you know that. I've had more fun watching Brady Manick in this one season than I've had watching a one and done guy at Carolina in a long time. He is extremely good. He's a 5th-year senior. He put up 16 points against Baylor in 2016.
Oh, wow.
It's been that long since he played with Trae Young. He was a starter on Trae Young's Oklahoma team.
What?
That's almost unbelievable, isn't it?
That's it. That means I've literally looked at him for like a good 10, 15 games and never like remembered his face.
Isn't that nuts that he was a starter with Trae Young?
Man, crazy.
And Cameron McGusty, who is Miami's best player, was a starter on that team as well. So, yeah.
That's funny. Miami was another team I was kind of looking at, like another inconsistent year, but they're always like extra competitive in the tournament.
Yeah, and one thing I like to look at is great coaches. And so I think Larry Ncaa is a great coach. I mean, there are a lot of really good coaches, but you look at guys like Larry Ncaa, you look at guys like, to me, you just mentioned Virginia Tech. I think Mike Young is a great coach. So it just comes down to personal opinion on that.
It's so critical with especially the tournament, like it's situational coaching. Like it's the teams that are adapting all year, adjusting, and it's tough to predict that, similar to like how teams will play.
For sure. And yeah, like you say, halftime adjustment, stopping a run, because in March it can get away from you so quick.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's one game and you're done. It's single elimination. So, yeah, absolutely. I wanted to mention, I think Tennessee. So people, I don't know if you've seen online, people are mad that Tennessee got a 3 seed.
Yes. I mean, that Kentucky game, hey, I'd give them a 2 seed just for that Kentucky game.
Right. They've looked great. And I think they might lose in the first round. I really think they might get upset by Colgate. I mentioned Colgate. We'll see. But Tennessee, to me, they don't have star power, like I mentioned. They don't have that. Well, Kenny Chandler's a great player, and he'll go in the first round of the draft. But
yeah, I saw them a lot early in the year, like bits and pieces, and they were just very energy was often low. Like they struggled to match the team they were playing. Couldn't really depend on any specific offensive like thing. But I don't know, man. That Kentucky game was like a night and day difference.
Yeah, you're right. They are peaking at the right time. So you really don't want to pick them to get beat because they are playing their best basketball right now.
I mean, yeah, Colgate's not a school I know anything about, so we'll see how that turns out.
I've only seen them play once, and it was last season in the NCAA tournament. They've got 3 guards. Nelly Cummings is one of them. They've got 3 guys that can shoot the lights out of it, and that's one thing that I wanted to mention as well. You talk about age. Age is big time. 3-point shooting is really big. Because if you have a big that's an elite big, he gets in foul trouble. You're setting him on the bench for 10 minutes. You know, I mean, that's
and a lot of the top schools, real quick, have depth problems. So that really comes back to hurt you in second halves, especially.
Foul trouble. I mean, God forbid an injury. Yeah. Then you're throwing a guy out there that's played 8 minutes a game in the biggest moment of your season. So you're right.
Another perspective I have coming into the tournament, if I am trying to predict what's going to happen, the kind of the history of the team's performance in tournaments. So like Baylor, for example, prior to last year, I rarely ever had confidence coming in with Baylor.
Right.
Gonzaga is another team for a long time, had no confidence.
Nobody wanted to play them. Right.
And so this is kind of the thing for me. Gonzaga had a very easy schedule down the stretch. I'm looking around all these conference tournaments. Duke is battling, Kentucky's battling, Purdue's battling. All these teams playing really well, like figuring out, peaking at the right time. How do you feel about them?
That's a great point, man. I mean, I don't want to say that Gonzaga is vulnerable only because they have the best front court in basketball. But Drew Timme and especially Holmgren. I was on the fence about Holmgren last time we talked. I watched a couple of games since then. The dude is unreal. I saw him take it coast to coast and have a dunk at, what is he, 7'1"? I mean, he's really ridiculous. So with Holmgren, he's such a matchup problem that a smaller mid-major school, I don't see them being able to pull it off. But Boise State, who they may play in the second round, is a great team. They played in a great conference, like you said, battle tested. They had 4 teams make the NCAA tournament from Boise State's conference. Them, Colorado State, let's see here, Wyoming, who's playing tonight,
Mhm.
and San Diego State. So they've been battle tested all season long. And Gonzaga only had, well, they had 3 teams make it, but like you say, I agree with you on that.
I didn't see them because none of their games are interesting enough to go to. But I'm like they're showing the highlights during and after games, and it's blowout. Like I forgot. I think they had one game that was kind of close against somebody, and then it's blowouts the rest of the way.
Yeah.
I just when you get to that like round of 16, it's not gonna be that easy.
It may be good for them to get a scare in the second round, you know?
Yeah, and it's interesting. A lot of times they don't. They kind of
Right.
dominate who they're supposed to, and then when they play kind of the teams on their level, they struggle.
When they get challenged that first time,
Yeah.
you're right about that. So I think it may be good for them to get challenged. I think this year's team is the best Gonzaga team we've seen. Who was the kid that went to Orlando?
Suggs.
So they had him last year, but Holmgren impacts the game on so many levels that I think he's just a step above Suggs. Although I did say I like guard play more in March. Hopefully,
Holmgren is one of the few bigs that elevates their guards.
Yes.
Like Timmy's been a good player for a long time, but I've never seen him elevate any of their other players.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how that plays out.
Absolutely. I will probably have Gonzaga in my Final Four, but just because I think they're the best team. But I do see what you're saying about not being tested, and that's a concern. I'm sure that's why Mark Few went and scheduled all these great teams they played in November.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time since November, but they did get tested then.
Their schedule was a little bit better. I remember the UCLA game at one point was a very big game, and UCLA was still a premier team at that point.
Yeah, and the one good thing for Gonzaga is Duke is in their bracket, and Duke beat them earlier this year. So I like teams that get the revenge factor second time.
I like that. And I guess we got to talk about Duke. Bad losses. I caught both of them, unfortunately. They don't dominate. They don't control the game enough to me. And then you have your 8 guys deep. That kills everybody in the tournament. I don't know if I've ever seen a team succeed with 7-8 guys. Every round. No depth. I don't really trust any of the playmakers.
Other than Paolo, probably. I don't know how you feel. Yeah.
I don't know. It's like they fall apart. These 2 games, I'm watching them fall apart, and they're just kind of like, Paolo, like, take over. We're gonna force feed you. We're not gonna run anything. He's not like a complete and utter Joel Embiid level mismatch.
Right.
And I just haven't seen him do anything differently these 2 games.
And they don't play defense. They can't fall back on their defense. And a lot of times when teams struggle, like you're saying, they can.
Yeah.
So, and they're young. And that's one thing that I think is a negative in the NCAA tournament. So, yeah, with Paolo, I think he needs to do his best to stay near the low post because he's such a mismatch down there. Unless you have a great 6'10" defender that can also move his feet, which is few and far between.
Yeah.
Paolo needs to stay in that range, the 10 to 8 feet range. And if he gets hot, okay, step back and start taking more, maybe a 3-pointer, maybe 20-foot shots. But when he gets that low post footwork, man, I don't know if you've seen his spin move. Ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. He's got a good drop step, too. He clearly was a guy. He looks like a guy who grew really fast. So he had to really learn like how to be a big man early on.
And he's still learning, yes. I mean, his body, my girlfriend was like, that dude's 18 years old. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hey, these guys now are just built different.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we got to get into our Final Four. And I'm trying to avoid mentioning specific players too much because I do want to get into that at the end. But give me your Final Four and make a case. I want you to make a case for every single team.
Okay, so I feel like a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but and they're not playing great basketball right now. But to me, Purdue has the great guard, the elite guard.
Yes.
They have the elite big man. What's been killing them lately is Sasha Stefanovic. I think he has a hand injury. And to me, he was one of the best role players in the nation. And you go back and look at his last 3 or 4 games, I think he's like 2 for 20 from 3. So he's really struggling right now. If they can get him on track, get through this first weekend, let him rest up a little bit more. I like Purdue a lot because Jaden Ivey is next level. He's a guy that can take over in the tournament, can get hot. So I think Purdue is probably my favorite out of that region.
Okay.
Do you have, let's see what region is that? Who do you think is going to come out of the East? You got Baylor, Kentucky, Purdue, UCLA.
I think, to be honest, like, to me, I can't really picture North Carolina figuring out a way to beat them, assuming that's how it turns out.
Yeah.
UCLA, to me, is not really that much of a threat to them. And then they're getting Purdue or Kentucky, I'm assuming. And to me, they're a favorite either way because Purdue is way too dependent on Ivy and the big man.
Yeah.
And who did they just lose to in the final?
Yeah, that killed me too. I bet on them. They lost to Iowa, which I was playing good.
Yeah. It's not that it was a bad loss, but it's the same thing I saw with Duke. Teams not playing well, we're just like trying to force feed the best player. Those teams never survive in the tournament.
Yeah, unless that one guy gets hot, which you got to get extremely hot. And
Yeah,
I can't think of any specific examples of that.
I like Ivy,
top
but
of
I
my
don't
head.
think he could get who was it? Carson Edwards. I don't think he could get like Carson Edwards hot.
That was ridiculous. Or Kemba when they made
Yeah. That's just like a whole other nuclear level.
Right. Yeah, so out of that region, I guess you got Baylor and I've got Purdue. I think that's a very good region. I could see North Carolina, if they beat Baylor, they could have a path, but I don't think.
Do you think Kentucky gets to Purdue in the Elite Eight?
So that 7-10 game, Murray State and San Francisco, that's 2 of the best mid-majors in the nation. Whoever wins that game will give Kentucky a run for their money, but I do think Kentucky will because Sheboy is a load. He's so hard. He's so hard to handle.
Oh, yeah.
And the one thing that he's done this year, Cal told him, man, I need you on the court. So don't foul. If you have to give up a little bit, that's fine. But we need you on the court for 35 minutes a game. So don't foul. And he's done a great job at that this year.
It's nice to see. I hope that's a trend with Kentucky bigs moving forward.
Yeah.
It shouldn't take 2 years to learn how not to foul.
Exactly. And Ty Washington with them, he's starting to round back into form. I think he had 25 points or so in it was either their last game or second to last game in the SEC tournament. So in the tournament, he's so talented. If he can get rolling with Sheboy, I think they'll make it out of the first weekend for sure.
I picture all these teams side by side, and Baylor athletically has such an advantage. And it's kind of what carried them last year. So I just maybe I'm still in the recency bias.
No, the defending national champs. I mean, you're right. They have a history of strong, physical, tough brand of basketball, and that's good to have in March.
Yeah.
So
Which bracket do you want to go next?
Let's go west. So that's Gonzaga's region. Other than Gonzaga, the only other team I could really see is UConn. UConn, they have a great guard, man. I really like their team a lot.
I haven't seen UConn much, but a little bit lower. What about Arkansas? Who's the guy? Of course, I can't remember his name. Scoring
JD
machine.
Note.
Yeah.
JD Note. Yeah.
I like him a lot.
He's a stud, and he's like 6'4", 6'5", playing point guard.
Yeah, he looks good. Very comfortable in pick and roll, deep range. He's fearless going inside.
Absolutely.
Again, I've noticed him. Has Arkansas shown you anything to get excited about?
Well, the number one thing for them is they played in the SEC, which was great this year. They are battle tested. You say you like that, they are absolutely battle tested. Got a good coach. They've got Note, like you said. I just don't know who that second guy would be. Jalen Williams was great for them, but he's not an elite scorer. So and Ncaa struggles with fouls. I don't get it. I don't get why he would put himself in that position.
Undisciplined.
Yeah. So
Just
if he gets in
he's
foul
going
trouble,
for
they're
steals a
going to
lot.
lose. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I'm concerned about that. But if he stays out of foul trouble, I do like Arkansas. That's a good call. I mean, I've done one bracket, and I had them losing to UConn in the second round. But now that you say that, that'll be a great game. I look forward to watching that game if those two teams play, UConn and Arkansas.
So I agree. Obviously, that's the smart pick, Gonzaga coming out. And the more I look at it, the less I am confident in any of the other teams. But for me, for the last couple of years, I do this thing where if I see a team way more than a lot of the other teams and I like them a lot, I like kind of hometown root for them in the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned last time you were on Texas Tech.
Yeah. Texas
Tech, they're not very dynamic, but they're inside out. They're very disciplined. They're well coached.
Yep.
They had a tough year as far as like they're not playing easy games. I think they could match what the front court does for Gonzaga.
Yeah, the only way to answer great offense is with great defense. They have great defense. Kevin O'Banner, the guy I mentioned from Oral Roberts, he plays for them now.
Yeah.
So you're right. I mean, the talent level for me is not quite there for me to pick them.
I know.
But they're a great team. So tough.
And they have depth.
Yeah, they do. They play
depth.
what?
I watched them. No, I watched them beat Baylor a little while back, and Baylor's getting in foul trouble and struggling to put people out there. Texas Tech doesn't have that problem.
Yeah. Isn't it funny that Chris Beard leaves Texas Tech for Texas? Now, I think that may be a great long-term move, but first year, Texas Tech, I mean, look at them. 3 seed.
Yeah. Who was it? It's not really the same situation, but I thought Xavier got a little bit better at first when Mack left.
Chris Mack, yeah.
Yeah, for like now that they didn't even make the tournament this year.
They didn't, yeah. And
that first year without
honestly,
him, they looked good.
I thought that they should have made it. Their record wasn't quite there, but they had a really good team. I hope they win the NIT. Either them or Wake. Those are my two teams I like in the NIT. But unfortunately, they did miss out. And I mean, they can't blame anybody but themselves. I think they had 14 losses, so I get it.
Yeah. I kept noticing them and just loss. It's tough to overcome that.
Yeah.
All right, which bracket? Let's go to the Arizona one.
All right, Arizona. Well, I love Colorado State. I mentioned them last time. I love their team, but my pick to go to the Final Four is Houston.
Really?
That's a little contrarian, and that's okay. I mean, I like Villanova, but Houston, if they still had Marcus Sasser, their leading scorer from last year, they would be a 1 seed, in my opinion. He tore his ACL, I believe. He's out for the year. So that's a tough loss, and that'll probably keep them from going to a Final Four. But I really like Houston. I mean, they have a really good team. They could get upset by UAB, who has a great team as well. Everybody.
I mean, I don't think Illinois is going to be an easy win for them if they get there.
Yep, you're right. I mean, Coburn is a load to handle.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of talented bigs in college this year.
Yeah. So it's just going to come down to who gets in foul trouble and who doesn't, I guess.
Again, from the teams I'm seeing, I trust Villanova more than any other team on here. So much experience. All these guys know how to succeed. They know what it takes, specifically in the tournament.
Yeah.
And another team who got better as the season went on. A lot of like crazy wins late in the year. A lot of battles. I think they're in good shape coming in.
Yeah, and you say that you like teams that historically perform well in the NCAA tournament. I can't think of a time where Villanova has really disappointed at. They may have lost in a Sweet 16 or something like that, but that's nothing to be ashamed about.
Yeah.
They have showed up every single year.
Yeah, I
My
really
memory.
don't remember, and I can remember most top programs having like a stinker year.
Yeah.
You know, like Duke has a lot. I remember both Michigan and Michigan State has had them. Obviously, Baylor's had them. Purdue's had a lot of them. Like a lot of these schools are struggling. Villanova's not in that category.
No, not at all. Yeah. So that, you got Colin Gillespie, who's won a national championship. He's led that team. He's been the heart and soul of that team for 5 years. I mean, it's going to be every coach in America. If you ask them, who do you want? One game, NCAA championship, you're going to hear a lot of Colin Gillespie's.
Yeah. Now, I didn't see Ohio State at all this year. Are they going to give them a potential challenge?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention about bracketology is you look at games and you hear people talk and you have upsets that a lot of people pick. So I think that Loyola Chicago, when they play Ohio State, I think more people will pick Loyola than pick Ohio State.
A lot of the safe people, a lot of the people who don't like to take risks, look at the 7-10, 6-11 to get the upset.
Exactly. So I look at it and I say, okay, if people are going to pick a 10 seed that, who knows, they may win, they may not. I'm going to pick the team that has the best player, EJ Liddell. I'm going to pick the team that people are predicting to get upset to actually win that game. So I think Ohio State will win that game, and then they do play Villanova. I think they could give them a tough test. Ohio State has been playing bad ball recently, but they play in the Big Ten, so they play top 20 teams every night.
Right. Interesting.
I'm not as concerned with teams that struggle down the stretch when your losses are quad one losses, quad one loss, quad one loss. When you're losing to great teams, it doesn't concern me as much. Although I would love to see a 15-game win streak.
But there you get more. You got to get more specific and look at the quality of the losses, like if it's injuries or bad play.
How they're playing. Yeah.
So it varies to me.
You're right.
Like I think the Duke losses are rough.
Yeah.
But like some other teams to me, who was it that lost to A&M? Purdue?
No. It was Auburn.
Auburn.
Yeah.
I didn't think that was a bad loss. I thought A&M was just had a lights out game.
Yeah, and I think his win over. No, it was Katie Johnson. Katie Johnson from Auburn. This is no joke. He missed 14 shots in a row in that game. And the all-time record for missed shots in one game is 17, I believe.
Yeah.
So he almost broke the all-time record for most consecutive missed shots in one game. 0 for 14.
I never overreact to that. To me, especially in a 1-2 game sample size, when we're looking, if it's a season long or like a month long thing, that's different. But a bad shooting night to me is nothing to overreact to.
Yeah, you're right about that. And the committee thought so as well, because they left Texas A&M out of the tournament, even though they got hot in the SEC tournament.
Yeah, that was surprising.
Maybe they attributed that Auburn loss and said, hey, they just had a really off shooting night. I'm not going to give A&M as much credit as other people may have.
Yeah.
So what? And that I have Houston and you like Villanova. I mean, I say Houston, and that's mainly to be contrarian. I like their team.
I got Houston getting to Villanova.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Illinois. I think Houston is the better basketball team. Illinois is very one-dimensional, like you mentioned, that you don't like. You got Kofi, and then he kicks it out to Plummer for a three. Trent Frazier's a great player, but they don't have anyone other than Kofi that I'm putting at the top of my scouting report.
Right.
So what? We got one more region. We talked about this region earlier. We talked about the Midwest. We didn't say who we think is going to go to the final.
Oh, the Kansas Auburn region.
Yep. What you got?
I think Wisconsin.
Well, they have the best player in that bracket, I think.
Yes.
In that.
I was gonna get to that. He's lights out. to me, I like how it's not so much that he's obviously shooting the ball great. It's how he's getting shots off teammates.
Mhm.
That's the thing to me. And that's, I think is going to be a good thing for him transitioning to the league, is being able to play off other people. But man,
And the
how
fact that
quick,
he's a two-way star.
yeah, how quick he is, how he doesn't seem athletic, but like he seems to bring it out when you need it.
Sneaky.
Yeah, I like everything about his game, and I like how they're very disciplined around him.
They know who they are.
Right. And I think they do that better than Purdue. I think they do that better than Duke. I would even say Kansas. I would say they do it better than Kansas.
Yeah, I would be shocked to see Wisconsin get blown out in the NCAA tournament. So I think if they lose, you're gonna see it on Twitter as one shining moment, buzzer beater type thing. They're gonna be in tight games.
Mm-hmm.
So they very well could make a run. I think it's hard to look past Auburn. I know you said you could see them getting beat. They have so
I
much
know
talent.
they're like the perfect pick. If you look at their surface level roster, the talent, the potential, it's the same thing with Gonzaga. Like, I just can't pick against them.
Yeah.
But I see we just talked about JT Note torch them in the middle of the season.
And so you're thinking if they meet up with Johnny Davis or even Miami, you think they could get torched from deep? Yeah, because you can't shoot over Kessler.
I don't know. Who's the other guy from Miami? Wong, I think.
Isaiah Wong, yeah.
Yeah, I like his game too. So I just think there's a lot of firepower here. Providence is a team of firepower. Creighton is a team who's always up and down, high scoring.
Yeah.
Like you said,
Iowa,
Miami.
you said you like.
I think this is gonna be tough, man. I trust Wisconsin's discipline over some of the other teams I've seen, namely Kansas, because they're the best team to me. But this to me, like, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Iowa comes out of here, honestly.
If Murray is almost unguardable. I mean, he's 6'10", and he shoots from everywhere.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah, he's unreal. I kept wanting to bet against Iowa in the Big Ten tournament because I don't think they have talent surrounding him. I wish McCaffrey would play his brother Chris Murray more because he's really a really good player. But I kept wanting to bet against them, and I was watching their games, and Keegan Murray didn't miss. He literally answered the bell every single time. It was unreal. I was extremely impressed with him.
So who do you got? Who's your final two? Who do you think is taking it all?
Well, this is going to be old takes exposed. I hate people that go with favorites. So I want to say Gonzaga and Auburn. I want to, but I don't think you're allowed to come on a podcast and say that, right? You can't say two of the top teams.
No, I mean, they're to me, again, they're not that proven. They're not that proven. So to me, it's not going to be an easy road for Auburn, even if their first couple rounds are not that tough.
Yeah.
Gonzaga is going to be the same thing. Even if they have a light first couple rounds, they're going to get tested before the Final Four.
Right.
So it's interesting, man.
So what? I think you think maybe Wisconsin final championship game? Who knows? I mean, it's so much parity.
I'm gonna take a heart pick and trust who to me is the most NBA ready player that I've seen. Purdue, Jaden Ivey. I'm rocking with him the whole way.
I love it.
His energy just elevates the team. They can't. Yep. They're not as they're a little bit stiff playing through him all the time. But man, how explosive, how dynamic he is, how he could get shots off. He heats up from the perimeter almost whenever the team needs him to. Mm-hmm. So I think he's going to be. Who are they playing? Kentucky at one point. I think.
Yeah.
I think all teams they could comfortably beat and dominate.
I think their toughest game is the winner of that Texas Tech Virginia Tech game. I think if Virginia Tech gets past Texas, they could give Purdue problems. So if Purdue makes it out of the first weekend, I really like Purdue. I think Matt Painter needs to get Travion Williams on the court more. He needs to play 30 minutes or more in the tournament because he's so dynamic. He takes attention off of Ivy. I'd like to see him play Edie and Travion Williams together, but he's been hesitant to do that because they clog up so much space and Ivy needs space.
Yeah. And they're always hesitant to play multiple bigs. It's always kind of been their play style.
And I get it, but at some point you have to say, hey, our three best players are Zach Edey, Travion Williams, and Jaden Ivey. I'm going to play them.
Yeah.
You know, at some point, right?
And all guys, I'm comfortable having the ball.
Yeah.
Like just not necessarily just to score, just to rebound. All guys that are high IQ enough to run the offense through.
Yep.
So I'm curious if they live up to the potential, but I like how they've been playing.
Absolutely. And I mean, like we say, you never know, but you have to look at path. And I think Baylor is walking wounded. I think they're going to struggle. So if Purdue gets past Virginia Tech or Texas, and then they beat Kentucky, you're looking at, in my opinion, I mean, they could play Baylor, but if they do, I like Purdue in that game. If they don't play Baylor, they got either UCLA, North Carolina, maybe, but I really like their Elite Eight matchup.
So since we pretty much talked about all the teams we wanted to cover, and we mentioned most of the guys, but any specific players that we didn't talk about or didn't really talk about enough?
Yeah, one guy we haven't mentioned is Colorado State. We mentioned the team. Colorado State's David Roddy. I'm trying to think of a good comp for him. He's just 6'8", thick. You can't move him around. He's not very athletic, but the thing about him is he gets wherever he wants to go on the basketball court.
Oh yeah,
great shooter.
Those guys are unstoppable in college.
I really like him.
Anybody else?
You should check out that Michigan Colorado State game because you'll see Roddy, and I think he can make noise.
The only chance I'll miss it is if it's like either the latest game or the second to latest game.
I think they are the first game of the tournament. I'm pretty sure. I'll have to double check that, but I think they're the first game of the NCAA tournament.
Then I'll have eyes on them for sure.
Absolutely. So one other guy. Yeah, I mean, there's so many players that I like a lot. I think Ron Harper Jr., although you won't see great numbers from him, probably, Ron Harper Jr. and Rutgers is one team I failed to mention that I really want to talk about. I think they could make a Final Four run. I like Rutgers.
Interesting.
They have a great big. They have a great scoring guard. Ron Harper Jr. plays the three. I think, did you see earlier in the year when they beat Purdue on the half-court buzzer beater?
Yes.
Yeah. They have a really good team. I like Rutgers.
Man, Rutgers has come a long way too. Because when I was going to college, I was coming home to go to Maryland games a lot of the time, and Rutgers was like what Georgetown is this year.
Yeah,
just barely
that
like
bad.
Yeah, like an easy win on the schedule. Like you don't even take warm-ups. That's what Rutgers used to be. And to see them in the tournament playing really high level, they're competing in the conference every year. I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, who do you have? Do you have any players we haven't mentioned?
The Duke, Wendell Moore for Duke. I think like it's underrated how dependent they are on him.
As far as like a glue guy, you think?
Yeah, and I'm always skeptical of their guard play. I don't know if it's just watching them all these years, but he's a guy like you can clearly see they need him to play well for their guards to contribute consistently.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And he's old, so that's good. I think he's only a junior, but still, he's one of the couple guys on the Duke team that has experience. He's the team captain. He's their heart and soul. You're right. So if he could get hot, he could open up so many things for other players on their team. AJ Griffin, for example. AJ Griffin has been cold recently, and they need him to heat up. So if Wendell Moore's cooking, and you have to pay attention to Bencaro, AJ Griffin could be left open, and if he heats up, that's when Duke becomes dangerous.
Yeah. Another guy you mentioned briefly with Auburn, Kessler. Kessler's been a block machine.
Yeah, leads the NCAA 4.5 per game, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just ridiculous.
And man, it makes them so much more dynamic, explosive, and it covers up for, similar to Baylor. Baylor's athleticism makes up for a lot of any potential like flaws they have.
Mm-hmm.
This is the same thing. Their athleticism gets stops at such a high level that they get easy opportunities, that even if they're not playing well, they're winning games.
Yeah, and he's been limited the last few games with an injury. I think it's like a shoulder. He's only played 20-something minutes in 2 out of the last 3 games. So I'm hoping that was more precautionary than anything. Auburn knew they were going to be a top 2 seed.
Yeah.
So hopefully they were just holding him back a little bit, and he can come back and be as effective as he has been all season. Because if he's in the middle, he's kind of like Holmgren. I mean, he is, I don't want to say the dollar store Holmgren, but
no, I see what you're saying. It's a little bit different, but the kind of the play style is similar in some ways.
The impact of the game, they both change the game when they're in there.
Yeah. That's really it for me as far as specific players go.
Yeah, I wanted to mention UAB. They played in the Conference USA. I watched the Conference USA. That's really the only conference. I watched the Mountain West, which I mentioned. That's really the only non-Power 5 conference I watched because I went to school at Charlotte.
Mm.
So they play in UAB's conference. UAB has a lot of things I like. Number one, they're old. Number two, I want a guy that scores. I don't want a guy that's a ball hog necessarily, but I want a guy that scores about 20 points a game from a mid-major, just because I want somebody that can go off and pull the upset. Do you feel like that's fair? Like, I know you want a balanced team, but you still want somebody that can really just go off.
Nah, balanced teams, they can't go far. Like, for the flip side of what the teams that don't have balance deal with.
Yeah.
You get later into the tournament, and now when you're not shooting the ball well, you're just passing. You know, like when you're missing inside, or not, like the other team is matching you physically. Again, you're just you're stuck.
Right. And if you have that guy that can create his own shot,
yes,
like Jordan Walker, then even if he's missing, you could get offensive rebounds. You just don't want a live ball turnover.
Yeah. And I think Wisconsin, he's not quite the go get his own shot guy, but he's a tough shot guy.
Yeah, tough shot maker, tough shot taker.
And that's one thing, like, they've kind of had, but never to the point where I could see them making a deep run with that.
Now they do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when it gets late in the shot clock, who can you throw it to that can take one dribble, take 2 dribbles, get to a spot, make a shot? And that's why I think, who did I mention earlier that I was like, Providence. Providence doesn't have that. They have that balanced team. It's a great team. They had a great year, but in the tournament, I think you do need that.
Yeah. Especially, like, you could get away with it the first round or 2, or maybe 1 round.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't just keep it going the whole way through. You're going to run into a game. Sometimes it's not even the other team. You're just not playing well.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. And those teams just don't have something to fall back on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So do we have anything else? What are you thinking about?
No, man, I think that's it.
One last team I wanted to mention is Chattanooga. I wanted to mention them and failed to mention. They have the Conference Player of the Year, who's a sophomore. He averaged 21 points a game, Malachi Smith. And Chattanooga has everyone else old. They have great size. You know, most of the time you look at mid-majors and their tallest guy is 6'9".
Right.
And you're like, okay, if they face like maybe a Purdue,
yeah, they're hopeless.
Right. So they have good size. They have an elite scorer. The thing is, you look at the teams they're playing. I mean, they're playing Kofi Cockburn in Illinois. So do I really want to pick them to beat Illinois? Not really. But I could see it happening.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's pretty much all I have, man. I mean, I think the bottom line is it's going to be crazy. Who knows what's going to happen?
I gotta ask before we get out of here. I wanted to make sure I didn't forget this. Who the hell is Auburn playing in the first round?
Let me look here. Jacksonville State. Okay, so North Carolina legend Brandon Huffman. I don't know if you've watched North Carolina, but every time he touched the ball, he would travel. And no offense to him, I don't want to beat him up too bad, but he ended up transferring from North Carolina to Jacksonville State, and so now he's playing his former teammate Walker Kessler in the first round. Yeah, could get ugly. I don't know anything about them other than the fact that Brandon Huffman plays for him.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was one of the few teams I'm like, this is not a familiar like program that I've seen in this spot.
Like, are they new to Division I basketball?
Yeah. But all right, man, I appreciate you for coming on. Thank you for your expertise, your feedback. It's an exciting month coming up.
Absolutely. I can't wait, man. I appreciate you having me on. It was a fun talk.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll have some old takes exposed to visit in a month. Of
course. Always.
Hopefully not. But yeah, man. I mean, it's going to be a fun weekend. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for coming on. Thank you to everybody for listening. And we'll be out.